Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio, so today we need to take a little bit of a look at a very, very important ruling which has just come down from Japan. This is a kind of ruling where you're going to be sitting there in a game, and your opponent's going to do something, and you're going to go, that you can't do that, mate. That's definitely not in the rule. Oh. And it will be in the rules, ladies and gentlemen, and people will lose games because of this. And the ruling is all to do with Path to the Peak and that new tool card which can give you a V-Star power. Now, obviously, this leads to a pretty obvious ruling. Now, for those of you that haven't seen it, there are actually two tools in the set that can legitimately give you V-Star powers. One gives you an attack. We're not worried about that one today. And one gives you an ability. We are absolutely worried about that one today. So what we've basically got is Forest Seal Stone. And this is a tool which gives you a V-Star power. And I should say it can be attached to any Pokemon V. Well, actually, remember tools, unlike some special energy, tools can be attached to anyone you like. But this can only be used by a Pokemon V. So you can put it on a non-Pokemon V, but it doesn't do anything. And you put it on a Pokemon V, and it lets you use a V-Star power ability that lets you search for any one card. It's basically half of Arceus V-Star, but it can be used on any Pokemon V, which incidentally potentially makes it a phenomenal card in the early game. Like turn 1, going first or second, you got not much going on. Use this. Go and search any card. Is it as good as Arceus V-Star? No, obviously not. But Arceus V-Star demands firstly that you are playing Arceus V-Star, which you might not be, and secondly, that you get Arceus V-Star into play. That's pretty important. It's an evolution Pokemon and all that. Whereas this, it's an ability on a tool that you attach to any Pokemon V. So you can literally just attach it and then immediately use it, and you've got a V-Star power that lets you go and search for any one card. It's great. So then, of course, the question and the ruling comes down to, what about Path to the Peak? Path to the Peak, of course, being a stadium card that takes away abilities from Pokemon with a rule box. So I suppose this is one of those cards where looking at the exact text of the card might be, you never know, might be kind of useful. And the exact text of the card is, Pokemon with a rule box in play have no abilities. Not that they cannot use any abilities, they have no abilities. And at this stage, this is very, very important because that wording is crucial. So the question becomes, can a Pokemon V that has this new tool attached, can they use that V-Star power with a Path to the Peak in play? And the answer is yes. Now, this is Google translated, so forgive me. When the Stadium Snow Road to the top is on the field, it doesn't matter what Pokemon V it is, can my Pokemon V with the Pokemon's Forest Steel Stone use a characteristic of V-Star power, Star Alchemy? That is the V-Star power given by the card, Forest Steel Stone. Yes, you can. And my first reaction to this, as I'm sure most of yours, is, really? That doesn't make no sense. But I hate to break it to you, as much as it feels wrong, and it feels so wrong, it does actually make sense. It just feels really wrong. And it feels wrong because there's a Path to the Peak in play, and there's a Pokemon V using an ability. That seems wrong. But the deal here is very simple. Path to the Peak doesn't say you can't use abilities, it says you don't have abilities. So the way to think about it is that you look at that Pokemon V card, and any ability that would be on that card you pretend isn't there. But this tool card isn't on the Pokemon V, it is a separate tool that has an ability which can be used by the Pokemon V. And that's why the question of have no abilities versus can use no abilities, that's why it's so gosh darned important. If I attach this to, I don't know, top of my head, a Genesect V, for example, this is going to get very important, we'll get there in a second, then we need to look at what Path to the Peak does there. And the answer is, if we look at Genesect's ability is an ability on a Pokemon V, so it would be turned off, and Genesect cannot use Fusion Strike System. But if we look at this V-Star power, this Star Alchemy, which is given by the tool, Genesect can use that ability, because Genesect has no ability, but Genesect can use the ability on this other card, which is attached to Genesect. It feels really wrong, but it does actually make sense when you think about it. Genesect has no ability, but Genesect does have a Pokemon tool that does have an ability that Genesect V is allowed to use. And this is absolutely huge. And honestly, one of the best uses for this is a counter to Path to the Peak. Now, the reason I use Genesect as an example is really simple. Genesect is one of the cards that is most hard done by Path to the Peak. It turns off Fusion Strike System in this Genesect Mew deck, and that is a deck that generally plays very little draw outside of Genesect, because Genesect is such ridiculously good draw that you don't want to play any other draw, you want to use Genesect. So now, essentially, what you can do is you can find this card, attach it, and then your opponent puts down a Path to the Peak, and you just use your V-Star power to go and get a counter, whether that's a counter stadium or something else. And the thing is, a deck like Genesect Mew is such a good example here, because you've got a Pokemon V and a Pokemon V Max. There's no V-Star in that deck, so there's no V-Star power. And as a side note, right, just from your old pal Wassy here, if you are playing any deck with a Pokemon V in, but not a V-Star whose V-Star power you want to use, play one of these, would ya? If I printed an item card into this game that said, search for any card, it would be a 4 of in every single deck, without question. Well, if you're playing a Pokemon V, but you're not having a V-Star a power that you really want to use, then this becomes a phenomenal card. Attach it to a Pokemon V, just use this V-Star power. Like, if I'm playing Luminion to search out supporter cards, I'm going to be playing one of these. Because you know what? Luminion's going to hit the field at some point. Luminion has to hit the field. No, that's a lie, actually. It's not going to hit the field in every game, is it? But it might hit the field. And if it does hit the field, hey, now I've not just searched a supporter, but I've also used this to search any card. I don't care what Pokemon V you're using or for what reason, but I am absolutely telling you that if you're using any Pokemon V, then either you've got a V-Star power you want to be using, and that's absolutely fine, or you should be playing at least one of these cards to take advantage of this V-Star power. I believe that very, very strongly indeed. Even in single prize decks, if I'm playing Luminion, I'm playing one of these. So the point is, I can now use this to go and search out a counter for Path to the Peak. Or, you know, there's a bunch of decks that just play Path to the Peak that are just going to put it into play because, I mean, sometimes it's literally to get it out of their hand. Even if they're not trying to get rid of your abilities, if they're playing 4 of them, they don't want them clogging up their hand. If it's not going to be any good, they'll just play them to get them out their hand. But then if they play that and you want to use this tool, it is huge that this tool will work under a Path to the Peak lock. And I assure you this is going to make a huge, huge difference. Decks that are really shut down by Path to the Peak now have a V-Star power that can be used under a Path to the Peak lock to go and get any particular card they want to go and get. And it might not be a Path to the Peak counter, it might be something as simple as, I've almost won the game, let's just go and grab that last boss's orders and get out of here. That'll work. It's not the fanciest play ever, but I assure you, it will absolutely work. And this is huge. Now, there is a very big question here. And the question is, are these the only 2 of these tablets we're ever going to get? Or are we going to get more? Because essentially, if we get another tablet that gives us a V-Star power that is an ability, this ruling will apply to that as well. And the answer is, it's very, very unlikely. Not impossible, but very unlikely. The reason essentially is, if we look at the release schedule for the Pokémon TCG moving forward, you've got this Paradigm Trigger, and then we've got V-Star Universe, which is going to be a mini set or not a main set, an A set, so to speak. And I'm fairly sure from everything we've seen officially with all the alternate art cards we've seen in English but not Japanese, it's very likely, though not guaranteed, that it's going to be mostly a reprint set. And they could put some new ones of these into a reprint set, but they generally don't tend to do so. Again, there is a big difference between they won't and they generally don't tend to do so, but I think it's fairly unlikely. So there's a decent chance that this might end up being the only one of these we ever see, but it is an absolutely phenomenal card, an ability that lets you search for any card that can be used as early as turn 1, and like I've said, in any deck that doesn't have a specific V-Star power you want to use, but is playing any Pokemon V even as support, I strongly believe you should be playing this. And given how much play I think this should see, and given how often Path to the Peak is put into decks, spoiler alert, constantly, again, Tour Direct left just won Peoria Regionals with a Lost Box deck playing for Path to the Peak. This is an interaction which is going to come up over and over again. I am 100% convinced we are going to see this interaction a lot, because Path to the Peak sees a huge amount of play, and I believe this will see a huge amount of play. This is a very, very big ruling that you are going to need to know. Because if you try and use this in a tournament and your opponent goes, oh mate, you can't do that Path to the Peak, and you then don't do it, you're going to lose a game that you shouldn't be losing. And that's a very bad thing. So when I say this is an important ruling, I mean it is huge. This will probably end up determining the outcome of games. Please make sure you know this ruling. There we go. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That's what you need to know, and now it's over to you guys. Do you agree with this ruling? Do you believe this ruling? Do you think it's going to be important? Let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk Pokemon and Pokemon cards and all kinds of fun things. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts where I answer all of your questions, join a Discord to chat with us, all kinds of fun things. Oh yeah, and get shout-outs on the channel, like the lovely Faye K, who is one of our newer Patreons and is a very lovely person. So thank you, Kay, for the support and for being a very lovely person. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.